Conditions May Apply by CinnamonPinecones. Read by Distracted by Books. Chapter 155, Questions and Non-Answers. Setting aside his confusion on why Izuku would pretend to be quirkless left him with a burning pool of guilt and rage in his stomach. He had forced Izuku to sit right behind someone who had put scars on his body. He had forced him to spend 7 hours of his day in the same room as someone who tormented him. He had allowed things to get to the point where that student nearly killed him. Burns. Why did it have to be burns? Burns were some of the most painful injuries Shota could think of, and they had plagued Izuku for so long. He hadn't forgotten the uncharacteristic panic on Ivy's face after he had kicked the door into that flame-filled room they had gotten trapped in during the Yakudo raid. They had been shut in a cupboard for hours, hiding from a man with a fire quirk, and they never stopped fighting. That kid had been through too much. Shota had taken the latter half of the day to go investigate Aldera, and he'd made it back home before Hizashi and Izuku, so he found himself staring at the droplets of water sliding their way down the shower wall. He was too angry right now. He couldn't let Izuku see him like this. For once, he was hoping that the kid's track record of getting home and shutting himself in his room would be reliable. He had heard Zashi obnoxiously calling out, "Honey, I'm home!" about 5 minutes ago, so he knew he didn't have long before he came bursting through the bathroom door. With a sigh, he turned the faucet off and stepped out of the shower. He was glad he brought his towel out to the bedroom because Hizashi chose the exact moment he exited the bathroom to swing the bedroom door open. "Geez, Zash, would it kill you to knock?" He snipped at them after they quickly shut the door behind themselves. "It's my own room," they argued petulantly, "and I'm not trying to flash the whole hallway." "I don't mind," they replied with a shit-eating grin and cartoonish eyebrow raise. He shot them a glare, stepped into his closet, and shut the door behind himself to change. He could hear muffled arguments about cruel and unusual punishments from the other side of the door, but he had no issues ignoring them. Regardless of his knowledge of what Shota had been doing earlier, Zashi always knew when he was upset, so he had no doubt that they were just trying to lift his mood and make him laugh. But now really wasn't the time. He got dressed quickly and re-entered the bedroom to see Zashi perched on the ottoman at the end of the bed, patiently waiting for him. They smiled a little sadly at him to let him know that they were ready to listen. "I don't have a good feeling about that school," he started. "Did you expect to?" Zashi asked skeptically. "No, but you know how he is. He's too smart for his own good. He probably could have flown under UA's radar if not for exacerbating circumstances. I guess I was just hoping it was well-meaning people falling short," he admitted. "But you don't think that's the case anymore?" they pressed. "No, I don't. They all had this attitude about him. They all expected that I was investigating him, not the school. Like I was trying to get him kicked out of UA or something. One of them, well, it's not spelling anything good. I'm getting a warrant. I don't want to give them time to get suspicious in case they are hiding something." "All right, that sounds smart. What else? I have a feeling that's not all," they replied. Shota hesitated before explaining. He knew Hizashi needed to know what was going on, but some stupid part of him didn't want to tell them. He already failed to protect Izuku from what happened. He felt like he needed to at least save Zashi from the truth. The injury that was on his file, none of them had much to say about it. It happened in gym class, and apparently he didn't let anyone look at it. likely because it was bad enough that he knew he'd be sent to the hospital. He somehow weaseled his way into convincing them to turn him over to his mother's care, since they knew she was a nurse, which obviously never happened. Okay, that seems like some serious negligence, they agreed. Yes, that's my point. They just told me all of that like it wasn't an issue, he stressed. Wait, how did he get burned in gym class? Hizashi doubled back. Shota took a deep breath in and let out a sigh as he sunk down into the office chair that had been relocated to their room after Izuku moved in. A work accident, he said, putting in air quotes to communicate that he didn't buy that story for a second. Why'd you say it like that? Do you remember Bakugo's behavior at the beginning of the year? He saw the realization dawn on Izashi's face. The horror and fury that he had been stewing in for the past 2 hours was mirrored perfectly. You think Bakugo did that? They asked, clearly hoping that wasn't the case. He was out for a week with a burn. Not just any old quirk can do that. I haven't looked into the registry for his other classmates' quirks, but it lines up. He trailed off. What are you still not telling me? They pressed. I spoke to his previous homeroom teacher, and he claimed that Izuku pretended to be quirkless for 12 years. He called him the same thing Bakugo called him on the first day of classes. He explained, finally letting his face distort with disgust, like he'd been stopping it from doing when talking to the staff at Aldera. He what? Wait, someone on staff called him an adult. Called him that? They asked incredulously. Yes, openly and casually, directly to my face after I had introduced who I was, he replied, relieved to have someone reacting like they were supposed to react to that information. What the? None of this makes sense. Zashi trailed off as he looked at nothing, trying to scrounge up a logical explanation written between the lines. I'm aware, he replied tensely. Hizashi's mouth distorted into a grimace, but they didn't say anything. Why are you making that face? He pushed. 'Cause you're not going to want to hear what I have to say, they answered. He reluctantly shot them a face that said, just tell me. We need to talk to him about this, they said sympathetically. He closed his eyes and took in a deep, exhausted breath. You're just going to be hitting your head against a wall if you don't. You can't ask anyone at the school until you get a warrant. Bakugo's certainly not going to tell you, and you shouldn't wait and go in blind if there's a possibility that they could hide evidence, they argued. I didn't say you were wrong. You don't need to sell me on it. I just... this is such a frickin' mess, he said as he scrubbed his hands over his face. They sat in tense silence for a moment before Shota got to his feet and made his way for the door. Wait, where are you going now? Zashi asked, surprised. I'm not turning this into another several-week ordeal, he answered. Do you want me to come with? That was a good question. He was angry right now, and he didn't see that changing anytime soon. He knew he wasn't going to be able to hide that from Izuku, not completely. It would probably be better to have Zashi there to balance him out. Yeah, call him out to the living room. Make sure he's got everything due tomorrow done first. Something was going on. Izuku didn't need to be a genius to notice that. Eraser had left school early today for something, and now he was hiding away in his bedroom. If it had anything to do with him, then he didn't want to know, so he firmly shut the observations out of his mind and started working on his homework. He didn't even get 15 minutes into it before there was a knock at the door. He was surprised to see it wasn't Eraser. It was Mike. "Hey, kiddo, what you working on?" he asked. "Just the essay for ethics." "That's not due for a week, right?" Yeah, I just wanted to get a head start," he answered with a blush. "Nothing wrong with that. Good thinking ahead. You have anything you still got to do for tomorrow?" Oh, gosh. What was he hedging around? He wished they would just get to the point. "No, the next thing to do isn't till Monday." "Jeez, kid, you're on top of things. Don't tell your friends, but I was always a procrastinator," Mike said in a stage whisper. "I didn't learn how to get ahead of things like that until I was nearly done with college." "Your secret's safe with me," he replied with a little laugh. "Do you mind stepping away from that essay for a bit?" they asked hesitantly. God, what now? That was his "we need to talk" tone. They hadn't used that since they dragged him out to get a trim, started forcing him to stop taking showers at school, and actually use the fancy expensive shampoo that they had gotten him here. Sure, his hair was more manageable than it had ever been in his life, but it still felt wrong. He didn't like using up their hot water and making them spend their money on him. Uh, no, that's fine," he lied. "We want to talk to you in the living room," he explained with an apologetic smile. "We? Him? What was such a big issue that it required both of them? Did he do something wrong? Did he not clean the bathroom right? Did he forget his dishes? Did he leave his shoes on again? Did he do all of those things in rapid succession?" "You're not in trouble," Mike assured him. The reassurance didn't help in the slightest. He was never not in trouble. He had never not been in trouble. Wait, did this have to do with what Eraser was doing after all? Damn it, that was even worse. He wished he could just jump out the window, but he obediently followed Mike out into the living room instead. Eraser was already sitting in his usual spot, and Mike was taking his place next to him, so Izuku sat down in the armchair closest to the guest room. "I paid a visit to your junior high this afternoon," Eraser started. Izuku didn't even hear the end of the sentence before his blood stopped pumping through his veins with all the force of a truck hitting a brick wall. He commanded his heart to continue beating through sheer force of will and tried to cover up his momentary episode, but it was too late. Eraser had stopped talking, and they were both looking at him with a concerned expression. "You aren't in trouble. Sho just has a few questions," Mike said once Izuku's hearing came back online. Not in trouble? Not in trouble? All Might was going to kick his ass. They were going to find out about his quirk, and then they were going to know. No, no. They were not going to find out about anything. He had a contingency plan for this already. Just stick to the script, Izuku. Okay. He nodded shakily. Letting his actual fear come out a bit would sell his story. Everything was fine. This was going to work. It was a good plan. All Might said this was a good plan. The two of them spared a glance at each other before Eraser spoke again. "I didn't get the chance to talk to many people, but I spoke with the nurse and one of the PE teachers about an injury you sustained on campus 3 years ago," Eraser continued. "Oh, God! Not that. Shit, shit, shit. Why did it have to be that? They claimed there was a quirk accident that led to you being injured enough to be granted a week off of school. I know you and Bakugo went to the same junior high and had a rough history. Please be honest with me. Did Bakugo do that to you? Eraser asked. Cheesy freaking rice! Why now? Why did they have to dredge this back up now? Kachan was leaving him alone. He hadn't spoken a word to him since the sports festival. They were fine. Everything was fine. Why? Why? It was he didn't mean to. He stuttered out inelegantly. But did he do it? Eraser interrupted, disappointment evident in the line of his shoulders. He didn't mean to. He's been better. Kid, better isn't good enough. No, he's not. He's just, no one ever told him no before you. He listened. He hasn't caused any problems since the Izuku trailed off, his mind getting a bit lost in the memories. Kiddo, no one should have had to tell him that treating you like that was wrong, Mike said kindly once Izuku stopped talking. They weren't going to let this go. Not unless they had more context. It wasn't Kachan's fault, not really. As much resentment as he held for his former friend, he knew it wasn't his fault he turned out like this. Everyone encouraged him. He was taught to hate like that. Kachan had been working his whole life to get into UA, just like Izuku had been. If that was taken away from him now, he would be so completely and thoroughly crushed. He couldn't do that to Kachan. It had only been a few months and he'd changed so much. He could be a hero and a damn good one. Izuku couldn't let some null hold him back from his future. I didn't stop him. No one stopped him. It's not his fault. Why? Eraser interrupted him. What? None of this makes sense to me. Why didn't anyone stop him? And why did he call you what he called you on the first day of class? Okay. Yep. Here goes. Deep breath, Izuku. Stick to the script. My quirk is, it didn't really work. He started the explanation. It didn't work. Eraser pressed. It was too much for my body to handle. I wasn't strong enough, so it broke my bones. If I tried to use it, still does if I'm not careful. The entrance exam and the USJ, I overdid it. That's why but I'm getting better. I can use it more. I'm still trying to. He didn't realize he had looked down at the floor as he talked until Mike spoke up. Kiddo, it's okay. We know you're trying. We just didn't realize how much of a struggle that's been for you, he tried to calm. He risked a glance over to Eraser, and he almost wished he hadn't. He looked angry, but the expression faded the moment they made eye contact. He didn't know whether he preferred the anger to be aimed at him or at what had happened to him in the past. He knew that Eraser was on a bit of a crusade with his case. He knew that Eraser cared about him, that he was angry that the things that had happened at all. Hell, Izuku would have done the same thing should their positions have been swapped. But this wasn't worth it. There were too many people against him in this, and it was pointless to try and bring them all to justice. Plus, they weren't even wrong. He was a null. So everyone thought you were quirkless until UA? Eraser asked tensely. I, um, yeah, guess, he answered. What changed? I practiced. I got stronger so that I could use it. But I mean, no one would have believed it. It was easier to just play along. I couldn't risk drawing attention to myself. I didn't mean for it to. I never told Bakugo, so he thought I was lying to make him look stupid. He's been better. Really, he has. He insisted, though it sounded weak to his own ears. Shota felt a missing puzzle piece fall into place. It was all starting to make sense. It didn't make the situation any better. No, it was still awful, but at least it made sense. He remembered Ivy saying something about having broken bones before on several occasions, so he guessed he had an answer to that now. It also made sense why Izuku was convinced he would never be a hero and why he was so focused on patrolling. He was trying to get stronger. Was increased strength training his day job? He was probably calling off patrol so often to nurse the injuries caused by trying to figure out his quirk all on his own. Did he? Never mind. That was besides the point right now. He could sort that out later. What's important right now is that Izuku had been living in close proximity to his bully 4 months, and they hadn't done a damn thing about it. I understand that the entirety of the blame can't be put on Bakugo's shoulders, but Hizashi's right. He should know better than to treat people like that. Do you really think he deserves to be a hero after everything he's done? He's changing. He's different now, Izuku insisted weakly. Shota could imagine the thoughts running through Izuku's mind. He could imagine the guilt that Izuku would feel if Bakugo was expelled on his behalf. Both him and Hizashi were too empathetic for their own good. They were so stubborn in seeing the best in people. In his eyes, Bakugo did not deserve his spot in the class. There were 1,000 bleeding hearts out there like Hizashi and Izuku that deserved it more than him. But Izuku had already had so much agency taken away from him. Shota wasn't the one who got hurt here. Izuku was. So long as Bakugo continued to not pose a threat to Izuku's well-being, it should be Izuku's choice what happens to him. All right, he decided. Both Hizashi and Izuku looked at him with surprise on their faces. I will be watching him. If he steps a toe out of line, he is gone. I don't think he deserves his place in my class, but this is your choice. So long as his behavior remains cordial, he can stay. But if he steps so much of a toe out of line, he's gone. I am not going to let him hurt you again, he said resolutely. Hizashi shot him a smile that said they approved of his decision, and Izuku stared at him like a gaping fish. Shota wasn't sure whether the part that surprised him was giving him the choice or an adult assuring him that they wouldn't stand by and let him get hurt. But either way, it made his stomach churn. Common courtesy should not be so foreign. Izuku got out of the living room as quickly as he could. He had to warn Kachan, right? This was bad. He would never forgive himself if Kachan got expelled. Gah! He didn't even want to think about what Kachan would become if he had his dream ripped away from him. Izuku couldn't let that happen. Yeah, he definitely needed to warn Kachan. He needed to make a plan. He sat down heavily on his desk chair and let his forehead hit the table with a thump. Why did everything have to be such a damn mess all the time? Somehow, Shota left that conversation with more questions than he had going in. Why would his school have assumed that he was quirkless? There were plenty of people out there with unusable quirks. Well, not plenty, but it wasn't unheard of. Aldera should have received Izuku's records listing his quirk, just like UA had. Did all of this really come down to misfiled paperwork? Shota supposed it was possible that the staff was too bigoted to listen to Izuku and his mother was too negligent to advocate for him. But something about that still didn't make sense to him. What you thinking about? Hisashi spoke up. I don't know. It just doesn't make sense. He mused more to himself than to them. Bigots don't have a tendency to make sense, babe, they countered. No, that's not. Never mind. I don't know yet. I need to look into some things first. All right. Just let me know if you need to bounce ideas around, he offered, pausing for a moment before continuing more hesitantly. I think we need to talk about things going forward, though. If his previous school thought he was quirkless, then I highly doubt he's had any sort of quirk counseling. And there's also the issue of regular counseling. Things keep piling up. I think I'm going to talk to him about it tomorrow. Obviously, I don't want to force him, but he needs help, Sho. I know, but he's going to hate it, he groaned. That's fine. He doesn't need to like it. Keeping everything undisturbed might seem better, but it isn't going to be helping him in the long run. You know that. It will probably make things worse, but that's what he needs. He needs to feel everything he's been repressing so he can move past it. Otherwise, he's just going to be lugging it around for the rest of his life. He's had 2 months to settle. It's time to get to work, they explained confidently. Yeah, you're probably right, he admitted. I always am, they replied with a smirk. Shota just rolled his eyes at them and let himself fall back into his thoughts. There was still a piece missing from this puzzle, and he was going to find it. Katsuki was leaving UA after another uneventful day when he heard something very unexpected. Kachan! He heard the only person who ever called him that whisper shout at him from down a disused hallway. Sure enough, Deku was standing there waving him over and looking around like a weasel peeking out of their burrow, like someone was about to come over and bite his head off at any minute. This might as well happen. He had more than a few questions for the run anyway. What? He barked back. As he had expected, Deku clammed up and looked around again to make sure no one was watching them. Frick was he so afraid of? He had the nerve to shush him before waving him over again. Don't frickin' shush me, Deku! He spat back, but followed down the hall regardless. Kachan, please, this is serious. Just listen to me. I'm not going to listen to you. You're going to listen to me. What the frick is going on with you? Where the hell did that quirk come from? You owe me an explanation. After Aizawa-sensei knows about what you did in middle school. Deku cut him off. Shit. Wait. No. He would have expelled him already if he was going to be expelled, right? What the hell was Deku trying to warn him about? Okay, and he shot back. Kachan, he's going to expel you if you... I know. The jackass has made that pretty damn clear. He cut him off. Where the hell did Deku get off in playing the hero, acting like he was saving Katsuki from expulsion? Nerd never knew how to mind his own business. And now he was up in his high horse, poking his nose where it didn't belong again. No, this is recent. He just talked to me yesterday, Deku insisted. He remembered the last time that Hobo-sensei had pulled him aside for a talk. It had not been pleasant. He had called him aside before classes starting the day after their first training with All Might, when he had gone up against Deku and lost. He was already in a bad enough mood, and getting berated again didn't help that. It is the first week of class, and this is the second time we have met concerning your behavior. Hobo Sensei pointed out the obvious. Katsuki didn't bother giving that a response. Strike 1 and 2 are gone. The only reason you are still here is out of my hands. Another strike, and it becomes my decision again. I assure you, you will not like my decision, he stated flatly with a sharp undertone of anger. Why was he threatening him? All Might already chewed him out. How many times did they need to beat a dead horse? He maintained eye contact both because he wasn't a coward and because it was keeping him from rolling his eyes. It seems like you aren't taking this seriously. Allow me to spell it out for you. If Midoriya hadn't dodged out of the way, he would have been a charred and unrecognizable corpse, and you very well could have been crushed under the rubble you created. This isn't a slap on the wrist. Should Midoriya have the mind to do so, he could press charges against both you and the school, and I have no doubt the court would rule in his favor. It's difficult to charge a minor with something so serious as attempted murder, but with the right jury and the right lawyers, it would stick. You nearly killed another student. Do you understand that, Bakugo? Aizawa spoke slowly and calmly, letting each word brand itself onto his brain. He remembered Deku's charred skin, the way it looked so warped and wrong. He remembered the smell, too, the sweet nitroglycerins mixed with overcooked meat. He remembered the dreams he had for years after the fact, where Deku's skin was so disfigured that it sloughed off him as he gurgled and choked on the blood caught in his throat. That wasn't real. That didn't happen. Deku was fine. He dodged. He was fine. Everything was fine. Yes, Sensei. He choked out between clenched teeth. Good. You're dismissed, Aizawa replied coolly, glaring at him silently as he stumbled awkwardly out of his seat and through the door. No, he was not looking to have another talk with Hobo Sensei. Mind your own damn business, Deku, he sneered and stomped off. He didn't care about whatever the hell Deku was trying to warn him of. He wasn't going to stick around and let the freak talk down to him. He was so deep in the teacher's pockets that he was untouchable. Being seen with him in a secluded hallway didn't exactly sound like a good idea. It would be better if Katsuki just ignored him entirely. If he never talked to Deku at all, then no one could accuse him of whatever the hell they were trying to accuse him of. That could have gone better, though given the track record between the two of them, Izuku reasoned that it could have done much worse. There were a few moments when Kacchan's sneer dropped enough for him to hope that his message had gotten through, but he supposed only time would tell. He had done all that he could do, at least. Though the moment had passed, he couldn't stop thinking about it. If Kacchan actually got expelled, he's not sure what he would do. The guilt would be... He couldn't stop thinking about it. He was lost in his thoughts all the way through the commute home, and even still as he sat at his desk. Part of him wanted to just let it happen, but he knew he wasn't going to do that. He couldn't just do nothing. He was pulled from his thoughts by a knock at the door. Hey, kiddo, do you have a minute? Mike asked after he called them in. He had to stomp down the urge to groan in exasperation. Yeah, what's up? I wanted to check in with you. A lot's been happening lately. It's definitely been the most eventful semester I've had in a while, they commented pleasantly. He was inclined to agree, but the amount of bullshit going on around him seemed pretty par for the course at this point. Yeah, it's been kind of crazy, I guess. He agreed regardless. You seemed a little lost in your head earlier, they observed. He knew they were trying to get him to open up and talk about his feelings or whatever, but he'd honestly rather try to have a civil conversation with Kacchan right now. then talk about how he was feeling. He just hummed in response in a way that didn't really confirm or deny Mike's statement. You doing all right? They asked directly. The most honest answer to that question would probably just be incoherent screaming at the top of his lungs. And even though Mike would probably understand that, he decided a lie was easier. I'm fine. Mike looked disappointed at his response, but at this point, his desire to be done with this conversation outweighed his desire for them to not be disappointed in him, which was saying quite a lot because the split-second frown on their face had him feeling like ants were crawling under his skin. You know, it's all right if you're not. No one is expecting you to be all right. So, excuse me if I don't believe that. They pressed. He looked away from them and down toward the papers he didn't remember taking out of his bag. Why did they have to push this? He didn't know how he was supposed to respond to that, so he didn't say anything. Talking about it would help. I think you know that already, Mike insisted softly. What is there to talk about? You already know what happened. He found himself spitting back at them a little too harshly. Yeah, he needed to calm down. They were just trying to help. Cho and I have practically been glued together at the hip for 15 years, and I still need to talk things through with him before I feel better. Just because we were both there doesn't mean that we don't need to talk it out. Besides that, I don't really know what you've been through. I've got the cliff notes, and of course, I'm not owed that story, but I'd be more than happy to listen if you're willing to talk. He bit his tongue and took a moment to breathe before he answered again. I don't have anything to say. It sucked, and it's over, he replied calmly. Mike still frowned at that response. You don't have to talk to me or Show, but you have to talk to someone. If you leave all of that stuff sitting around up there, you're never going to move past it. It's like painting over a nail in the wall. You can slap as many coats of paint over it as you want to, and maybe you'll get to the point where you can't even tell what's under there anymore. But it's still going to be there. The fewer layers of paint you have to peel back and touch up, the easier it will be to fix the problem. He trailed off and let his words linger for a moment before he spoke again. We want you to see a counselor. He couldn't hide the visceral reaction he had to that suggestion. He grimaced violently, and Mike gave him a sad smile in response. I know. No one ever wants to hear that. But, kiddo, you gotta know what happened to you was messed up. We know you're not okay. No one would be okay after going through all of that. We just want what's best for you. Miyoshi-san put together this list for us. I want you to go through it. Maybe do some research into a few of the names and pick one. I highlighted the one Sho and I see. Obviously, you don't have to go with her, but we'd both recommend her. She's good. They spoke gently, as if that would make the words feel less like a smack in the face. He had his jaw clenched so hard that he felt like he was going to chip a tooth. Why were they even doing this? It's not like he could even tell a shrink what happened to him. He couldn't tell anyone the whole of what happened to him for crying out loud. This was nothing but a waste of time and effort. Surely they could see that, right? He didn't say anything as Mike set the list down on his desk. I'm sorry, kiddo. I know hearing that it's for your own good doesn't make it any easier, but it is. You'll be better for it. He knew that Mike was looking at him. He was expecting a response or something, but his eyes were steadfastly trained on the sheet of paper in front of him. There was no point in trying to voice his thoughts on the matter, and he knew that, so he kept his mouth shut. I'm gonna get dinner started. It'll probably be ready around 6, they said awkwardly. They were clearly hoping that a less charged subject might elicit a response, but he knew nothing kind was going to be said if he allowed himself to speak. Thankfully, Mike seemed to understand that because he didn't push it. He heard the door click shut, and for a second time in as many days, he let his forehead hit the desk with a heavy thump. End of chapter.